Picture a young man on a long march. He has got a pack on his back, loaded up 40 kilograms of gear, and it is riding on his two shoulders through the heat of the afternoon. Somewhere around the third hour, something happens to his arm. Not the pins and needles kind of thing you get when you sit on your foot wrong. Quieter than that. The arm just gets a little stupid. He goes to grip something and the grip is soft. He shrugs the pack off at the end of the day, and there, sticking straight out behind his back, is his shoulder blade poking up like a little wing that is trying to peel off and fly away. Now nobody hit this fellow. Nobody grabbed his wrist and yanked it up behind him. Nobody dropped anything on him. All he did, all day, was carry a weight on his shoulders for a couple of hours longer than he should have. And something back there, something he has never once thought about in his whole life, something he cannot see and cannot feel and does not know the name of, had quietly stopped talking to his arm. And here is the part that ought to bother you. He is not a freak accident. Go and dig through the medical records of soldiers with exactly this story, the numb arm, the drooping shoulder, and you find that 91 out of every 100 of them show real measurable weakness in that arm when a doctor tests it. And 65 out of every 100 have that same little wing, that same shoulder blade jutting out where it is supposed to lie flat and quiet against the ribs. This is a repeatable thing. It happens to people the same way, over and over, which is the first sign to a physicist that you are not looking at bad luck. You are looking at a mechanism. There is a machine here doing a definite job, and the job it is doing is breaking a man's arm without ever touching a bone. So let us treat this like a crime. Because that is what it is. There has been an injury, and there is no bruise, no cut, no obvious weapon. We have a victim, the arm, and we have a body that will not move the way it is told. What we do not have, yet, is a culprit. And I want to walk you through this the way you would walk through any good mystery, slowly, suspiciously, refusing to believe the first easy answer anybody hands us. Because the easy answers here are wrong, and the true answer is stranger and more ordinary than you would guess. It is sitting on your own shoulder right now, most of you, and you paid money for it. Now before we hunt the criminal, we have got to know the scene. We have got to know what is actually back there behind your collarbone, because that is where the whole story lives. So let me draw you a picture with words. Reach up and put a finger just above your collarbone, in that little soft hollow at the base of your neck. Right underneath your finger, a few centimeters down, there is a piece of engineering so beautiful that when you understand it, you will not quite believe your body built it without asking you. Coming out of your spinal cord, down in your neck, are a set of nerve roots. Think of them as the main cables leaving the power station. There are 5 of them that matter for the arm, and the anatomists give them names: C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1, which just tells you which little gaps between the neck bones they come sliding out of. 5 cables leave the spine, and now they do something that no sensible electrician would ever do. They do not run straight out to the arm, 1 cable per job. Instead, they braid. They weave together like a woman plaiting hair, like the strands of a rope being laid up, and this whole braided bundle has a name. It is called the brachial plexus. Plexus, that is just an old word for a braid, a weaving, a tangle, and it is the single most complicated piece of wiring in your whole body outside of your skull. Let me tell you how it goes, because the pattern is gorgeous. Those 5 roots first gather themselves up into 3 trunks. The top 2 roots join to make 1, the middle root goes off on its own to make another, the bottom 2 join to make the 3rd. So 5 becomes 3. Then each of those 3 trunks splits itself into 2, a front piece and a back piece, and now you have 6 divisions. 6. And then those 6 gather back up, rearranging who is holding hands with whom into 3 cords. And each cord wraps partway around the big artery going to your arm, which is why they get their names from where they sit. 1 behind the artery, 1 on the inside, 1 on the outside. And finally, only at the very end of all this braiding and splitting and regathering, out come the actual nerves you may have heard of, the ones that run all the way down to your fingers, the one that lets you feel the tips of your thumb, The one that, if you bang your elbow just right, sends that horrible electric jolt down to your pinky. Every one of them is a thread that came out of that braid. So count it with me. 5 roots, 3 trunks, 6 divisions, 3 chords, and then the final nerves fanning out to the whole arm and hand. That whole cathedral of wiring, that entire switchboard, is packed into a space behind your collarbone smaller than the palm of your hand. And I want you to hold on to that fact, because it is going to matter enormously. Nature took the entire electrical supply for your arm. Every signal for every finger, every flicker of sensation, all of it. And she ran it in one tight bundle through one narrow place. She put all her eggs in one basket, and then she hung the basket right under a bone you can knock with your knuckle. Now, a good detective, faced with our numb soldier, is going to be handed a suspect immediately. Everybody's got a theory. And the theory everybody gives you, the very first one, is the boring one. They say, oh, it is just a tired muscle. You carried a heavy bag, your shoulder muscles got fatigued, they got sore, they ache, big deal, rub it and sleep it off. And you know, that answer is so reasonable, so comfortable, that most people never look past it their entire lives. Their shoulder hurts after a long day with a heavy bag, and they think, muscle, tired muscle, case closed. But I want you to be suspicious of the comfortable answer, because a tired muscle does not do this. A tired muscle aches, sure, and then you rest it, and in a day or two it is fine and strong again. A tired muscle does not go numb. A tired muscle does not leave you unable to close your hand, and a tired muscle, most of all, does not make your shoulder blades stand up off your back like a wing. That last one, the wing, that is the clue that blows the whole muscle theory to pieces. Because for your shoulder blade to sit flat, a particular muscle on your ribs has to be holding it down, and that muscle only holds it down if a particular nerve is telling it to. The wing is not a muscle that got tired. The wing is a muscle that stopped receiving its orders. Somebody cut the phone line. The soldier's shoulder blade is sticking out because the message telling it to lie flat is not arriving anymore. So the muscle is innocent. We can let the muscle go. The muscle is a victim too, sitting there waiting for instructions that never come. What we are really chasing is the wire. Something happened to the wire. And now here is where it gets interesting. Because we already know where the most exposed wire in the whole body lives. Remember that little hollow above your collarbone where you put your finger? There is a spot in there where the top 2 roots first come together to form that top trunk, and the anatomists have a name for it. They call it Erb's Point. And this junction, this first splice in the braid, sits only about 2 to 3 centimeters above your collarbone, tucked just behind that big rope of muscle that runs down the side of your neck. 2 to 3 centimeters. That is barely the width of 2 fingers. The single most important splice in the wiring of your arm is sitting a fingertip's depth under the skin, right on top of a bone out in the open with almost nothing to protect it. If you were designing a body and somebody showed you that, you would send it back. You would say, you have got to armor that. You cannot leave the main junction sitting right there on the collarbone where anything pressing down from above would crush it flat. But nobody sent it back. That is exactly how you are built. And so the question sharpens the way a good question always does when you stop accepting the easy answer. It is not, why does my shoulder get tired? It is, what happens to a nerve, to a living electrical cable when you press on it and hold and do not let up? Because whatever squeezed that soldier's arm quiet was not a punch and was not a knife. It was a long, patient, boring pressure coming down from above onto the one place in his body least able to take it. So let us press on it. Let us do the experiment gently in our heads, because kind people have already done it for real on a rabbit's nerve and written down exactly what happens. Picture a single nerve trunk, a soft pink cord, and inside it, threaded all along its length, are the tiniest blood vessels you can imagine, feeding it. Because a nerve is a hungry thing. It fires all day. It needs oxygen the way a running man needs air. Cut off the air and it does not die at once. First it complains. Then it goes quiet. Then, if you are stubborn, it stops for good. Now watch the pressure climb. The blood coming into the nerve arrives with a shove behind it, arterial pressure strong. The blood leaving is tired, low, barely moving, and it drains through thin little veins that have almost no push behind them at all. So which gives way first? The weak one. The drain. When you put a mere 20 to 30 millimeters of mercury of pressure onto that nerve, and that is nothing. That is a soft thumb. That is the loose cuff a nurse leaves half inflated on your arm. The little veins collapse. The blood can still get in, but it cannot get out. And now you have a swamp. Fluid backs up, the tissue swells, and swelling squeezes the nerve from the inside while the strap squeezes from the outside. The trap starts closing its own door. Push harder. 40, 50 millimeters of mercury, and now even the pushy arterial blood, the fresh stuff, the supply line starts to stall at the gate. The nerve is running low on everything it needs. And then, somewhere between 60 and 80 millimeters of mercury, the whole thing simply stops. No blood in, no blood out. The cable is still there, perfectly intact, looking completely healthy, and it is starving in place. 60 to 80 millimeters of mercury. Let me tell you how little that is. That is less than the pressure in the arteries of your arm right now. A firm two-finger press, a strap with a decent bag on it. You are carrying that on your shoulder while you wait for a bus and thinking about absolutely nothing. And here is where the tension really ought to sit in your chest, because now a clock starts. This is not instant. A nerve robbed of blood does not fail in the first second, or the case would be simple and nobody would ever get hurt, because you would feel it and drop the bag. Instead, it holds on. It coasts. From the tourniquet studies, the ones where surgeons deliberately squeeze a limb bloodless to operate, we know the number. A nerve under that kind of pressure keeps working for something like 15 to 45 minutes before the signal genuinely blocks. 15 to 45 minutes. That is the length of a march between rest stops. That is the walk from the train to the office. That is a morning of errands with the strap biting down and you noticing nothing worse than a dull ache you have long since learned to ignore. The surgeons respect that clock so much that for the whole upper arm they cap the tourniquet at 200 millimeters of mercury and they watch the wall clock like hawks, because they know that past a certain time the paralysis stops being temporary and starts being a thing you take home. So the shoulder is not the scene of a sudden crime, it is the scene of a slow one. Nobody hears a shot. The pressure comes down soft and stays, the little veins give way first, the swamp forms, the supply chokes off, and a clock you cannot feel ticks through your commute. And your body, being polite, sends up a flare while there is still time. That tingling, that pins and needles fizz, that is not nothing. That is the nerve, starved and irritable, firing off nonsense because it cannot get what it needs. It is a smoke alarm. And what do we do with a smoke alarm that goes off every morning? We take out the battery. We shift the strap a half inch and keep walking. Now I can tell you what actually happened to that soldier and to the office worker and to the student, because it is all one story told at different volumes. When you compress a nerve like this, you strip it. Not the wire itself, not at first. You strip the insulation. A nerve fiber is wrapped in a fatty sheath, myelin, and that sheath is what lets the signal leap down the cable fast and clean. Squeeze long enough and the sheath gets damaged, and now the signal cannot leap. It stalls. The cable is unbroken, the insulation is wrecked, and the arm goes weak and numb. That is it. That is the whole injury in its gentlest form. And a man named Sunderland, back in 1953, sat down and graded exactly this, all the ways a nerve can be hurt, from a love tap to a catastrophe in 5 degrees. First degree he called Neuropraxia, and that is our culprit. Only the conduction is blocked. The insulation is bruised, nothing is severed, and the nerve, given time and rest, heals completely and comes back as if nothing ever happened. Second degree is worse. Now the actual fiber inside, the axon, is cut through, though the delicate tube it lives in survives to guide it back. Third degree, that guiding tube is torn too, and the regrowth gets messy. Fourth degree, almost everything is disrupted, and only the outer wrapping holds the nerve together, and now you need a surgeon. Fifth degree, the nerve is simply severed, clean through. The worst thing that can happen to a peripheral nerve. 5 steps. From your foot falling asleep under you at dinner to a wound that never fully mends. And here is the click. Here is the moment the whole case falls open. Your foot falling asleep. That prickly, useless, rubbery foot when you have sat on it too long. That is a first-degree Sunderland lesion. That is neuropraxia. You made it yourself, by accident, by pressing a nerve against a chair for 20 minutes, and it healed itself in 90 seconds of hopping around swearing. It is the identical injury. Same mechanism, same starved nerve, same stripped insulation, same recovery. The soldier's dead arm and your dead foot are the same event. The only thing that differs is the dose. Your foot got 20 minutes and a bony chair. The soldier's shoulder got a 40-kilogram rucksack and a full day's march, coming down on the one junction in the body that sits naked on a bone with nothing to shield it. Same crime. Wildly different sentence. That is the entire secret of the case, and it was hiding inside something you have felt 100 times and never once thought to be afraid of. Which nerves take the hit? The evidence is oddly specific, and it fingers the same few victims again and again. In one careful study of young conscripts, the nerve most often knocked out was the long thoracic nerve, the one that runs down to a muscle on the side of your ribs called the serratus anterior, whose whole job is to hold your shoulder blade flat against your back. 19 cases, that one. Knock it out, and the muscle goes slack, and the shoulder blade lifts off like a little wing every time the person pushes against a wall. That is the wing our soldier walked home with. After that, the axillary nerve, 13 cases, which lifts the arm out to the side. Then the suprascapular, 7. Then the muscular cutaneous, 6, the one that bends your elbow. The same short list, over and over, because those are the nerves that ride highest and most exposed through the choke point, right where the strap comes down. So the puzzle we opened with is basically solved. But a good detective knows the difference between how a thing happened and who kept letting it happen, and there are accomplices in this case who never leave a mark, because so far I have described a heavy load pressing straight down. That is the dramatic version. The rucksack. The 40 kilograms. Most of you are not carrying 40 kilograms. Most of you are carrying a bag that weighs a couple of kilograms on one thin strap, and you are doing something far sneakier to yourself, something that does not need a clock or a crisis. You are leaning. Think about it. A bag on one shoulder wants to slide off. Gravity is always tugging it down and out towards your arm. So what do? Without deciding to, without ever once noticing? You hike that shoulder up to make a little shelf for the strap. Or you tip your whole spine the other way to keep the thing from spilling onto the floor. And you hold that. All day. Every day. For years. An orthopedic surgeon named Sabrina Strickland put her finger right on this. Carry a heavy bag on one shoulder, she says, and you are forced either to hike the shoulder or lean sideways, and either way you pull your spine into a sustained sideways curve. Now nothing is being crushed in a dramatic 15-minute window. Instead, the whole shoulder neck scaffolding is held crooked, and the plexus, that braid of nerves, gets put under a gentle, endless stretch. Not a squeeze this time. A pull. And a nerve dislikes being stretched almost as much as it dislikes being pressed, because stretching it also chokes those same tiny blood vessels running along inside it, just by drawing them out long and thin, the way pulling on a garden hose narrows the bore. So the one shoulder bag has found a second way to starve the very same cables. It can crush them from above, and it can tow them from the side, and most days it does a little of both while you stand there feeling perfectly fine. And here is where the whole thing turns quiet and a little sad, because there is a name for what happens when you live that way long enough. Droopy shoulder syndrome. Say it out loud and it sounds like a joke, but it is nothing of the kind. The shoulder girdle, that yoke of bone and muscle you hang your arms from, simply gives up its normal height. It settles low. And when it settles low, it drags the brachial plexus down with it and holds it there taut all day. the way a clothesline sags under wet laundry and never quite springs back. You can even see it on a photograph of the bones. Take a side view of the neck, a lateral x-ray, and in most people the top of the rib cage is hidden behind the shoulder. But in these people, the first thoracic vertebra, the one we have been calling T1, the very last root of the plexus, pokes up into view where it has no business being visible. Sometimes T2 as well. The skeleton itself is telling you the shoulder has slumped so far that the nerve highway is stretched over the edge like a rope over a cliff. And if you let that go on, it can slide into the full-blown thing, thoracic outlet syndrome, where the plexus and the great vessels beside it, the subclavian artery and vein, all get squeezed in that same crowded doorway at once. Compression and traction, holding hands, working the same corner. So now the detective steps back and looks at the whole board, and the pattern is almost too tidy. Who does this happen to? Follow the load. One occupational health researcher, a man named Kevin Slates, went looking and found that women report far more back and shoulder pain from carrying than men do, and the reason is almost embarrassingly mechanical. It is not anatomy destiny, it is the strap. About 95 out of every 100 women carry a single strap bag, a purse over one shoulder rather than a two-strap pack that shares the burden across the back. 95% choosing, without ever thinking about it, the one carrying method that dumps the entire load onto one side of the neck. And the pain follows the choice like a shadow. In one study of young women, 18 to 35, more than 61 out of every 100 reported shoulder pain, and here is the detective's favorite kind of clue: the pain scaled with the weight of the bag. Heavier purse, worse pain. A clean dose-response line, the fingerprint of cause and not coincidence, which lets us rank the suspects from least guilty to most. Picture 3 ways to carry the same heavy thing. The two-shoulder backpack, worn properly, spreads the force across both sides and down the strong muscles of the back. It is the gentlest. Next, the crossbody bag, the strap running diagonally from one shoulder to the opposite hip, which at least lets your torso share the job instead of one poor shoulder. And then, dead last, the worst offender in the lineup, the single shoulder bag, which gathers every ounce of force and sets it down on one narrow patch above one collarbone, directly over that crowded alley we mapped. Same weight in all 3 cases. The physics of where you hang it decides whether your nerves ever notice. And that word, weight, is where the case finally hands you something you can use. Because the question is not really whether a bag is heavy. The question is heavy compared to what? Compared to you. The number the people who study this keep landing on is a fraction of your own body weight, somewhere between 10 and 15%. That is the ceiling. Carry more than that hanging off your frame, and you are asking the tissues to do work they were not built to do all day. And when they actually measured it, when they loaded people up and asked them when it started to feel wrong, the discomfort began right around 11% of body weight. So the body already knows the number. It whispers it to you as an ache before any doctor ever writes it down. The trouble is we are very good at ignoring whispers. Let me put that number on your own shoulder so it stops being abstract. Take a person who weighs 140 pounds. 10% is 14 pounds. That is the whole allowance, bag, and everything crammed inside it. The books, the water bottle, the spare shoes, the small museum of objects we all haul around, all of it together should come in under about 14 pounds. And now think about what an actual bag weighs. The surveys are a mess, honestly. They disagree with each other from one year and one country to the next, some saying an average handbag is around 3 pounds, others closer to 6 or 7. But you do not need a precise average to see the danger. You only need to notice that the heaviest of those bags on the smallest of those people, hung from the thinnest of straps, can march you straight up to the ischemia threshold and hold you there through a whole working day. So how common is the real injury? The frank nerve failure, not just the ache. Rarer than you might now fear, which is the mercy in this story. Brachial plexus trouble of all kinds runs around 50 cases per 100,000 people per year. The backpack variety, the pure compression and traction kind we have been chasing, about 25 per 100,000 per year. Small numbers. Most of us carry our overstuffed bags for a lifetime and never cross the line. But the ache, the tingling, the shoulder that sits a little too low in every photograph, that is not rare at all. That is the vast, quiet middle of the distribution, the low-grade version of the exact same crime, committed against millions of shoulders every single day. And I want to end on the mercy, because a good detective story should tell you the victim can recover. The nerve, remember, is patient. Almost all of these injuries are the mild kind, the first or second degree, the conduction block, the arm that fell asleep and simply needs the pressure lifted to wake up. Take the load off and the little blood vessels open again, the current flows again, the myelin rebuilds where it frayed. The great majority of backpack palsy cases recover completely. It can take time, sometimes as long as about 3 years for the worst of them, which sounds like forever, but it is recovery. Full recovery, and the body does it on its own if you simply stop doing the thing. And the fixes are almost insultingly simple, which is the best kind of ending because it means the answer was in your hands the whole time. Spread the load. 2 straps beat 1. Cross the body before you hang it off a single point. Widen the strap and pad it, and you can feel the reason in your own equation now. The same weight over a wider patch is a lower pressure on everything underneath. The thin cord replaced by the broad, soft band. Put a belt on the hips if you carry real weight, and let the strong bones of the pelvis take the burden the delicate doorway above your collarbone was never meant to hold. Switch shoulders, lighten the bag, throw out the museum. And build the muscles of the shoulder girdle so they hold that yoke up high where it belongs instead of letting it slump and stretch the rope. None of that is medicine. None of it is surgery. It is just physics, applied kindly to yourself. Force divided by area. Load divided by time. A braid of 5 nerves running from your neck to your fingertips through one narrow gate, carrying every message your arm will ever send, asking only that you not park something heavy on the gate and leave it there. So the next time you sling a bag over one shoulder and feel that first small complaint, that little pull, that faint pins and needles rumor down the arm, do not dismiss it as nothing. It is the oldest signal in the body, the same one your sleeping hand sends at dawn saying very politely that somewhere in that quiet, crowded passage the traffic has stopped moving and it would very much like you to let it flow again.